Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency, the Honorable Mark White, Governor of Texas.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, nice. Did you pack the crowd? No way. Thank you. Thank you very much. Governor Hobby and Speaker Lewis, members of the House and Senate, to state officials and friends and fellow Texans, I thank you. Many people believe that governors seldom, if ever, come before the Texas legislature and get exactly what they ask for. That's not so. On September the 8th, 1986, I asked for a tax increase and said, "Blame me." You did. So much for guts and glory. Whatever happens in the next 4 years, don't blame me. I have only a few things to say today, mindful of the short time left in which I have to say anything at all. But coming before you now, I view this not so much as an opportunity to govern, but to share some hopes on how I hope you will. My willingness to risk the consequences of a bold agenda for Texas came from believing that what we did here was vital and necessary for the future of our state, and above all, that it was right. We did what had to be done, reforming public education, recapturing our water resources, rebuilding a first-class road system, resolving to keep the state from going bankrupt, and yes, raising revenue when there was no other alternative, and being honest about it with the people. We tended to the basics, too long neglected, necessary to help Texas recover and necessary for Texas to keep going and building and growing with better opportunities. That's what government should do, things that only government can, and I complete my term confident that we have. I'm not here to dwell on the past. I'm here to point to some lessons we can find in looking back that may help guide our future. We're still learning hard lessons going back some 15 years to the first waves of rapid growth that began reshaping this state and the lives of our people. Those were flush years. Our cities grew up. Population exploded. Businesses sprouted like bluebonnets and jobs for everyone, and more kept coming. Profits were piling up and revenues were pouring in. For a time, Texas seemed to be a place of unlimited opportunity, never-ending fortunes, and we never had to do much to keep it that way. Everything just kept on growing. Luck was in the ground, and we had more of it than any other people. We'd been used to that. Cattle and cotton, timber, oil and gas, fuel for an economy, driving at open throttle. If we had built cars in Texas back then, there'd have been no brake pedal. Wouldn't have needed one. That was the prevailing attitude, and as we sped along just fine, producing and consuming and expanding, and it all just kept flowing. But we can also look back to the 10 years beginning in 1973 and trace the steps that led us into trouble. Schools were overcrowded and education suffered, not just in Texas, but everywhere. People were spending more time trying to make school painless instead of productive. Roads and major throughways were congested and potholed. Water was running short, both in supply and quality. Left unattended, bearing up under more and more pressure, our infrastructure was cracking. By 1983, Texas had been humming to the tune of no new taxes so long, some people had forgotten that taxes build the schools, the roads, the water system, yes, even the prisons. All the things a growing state would need 10 and 20 years down the road. That wasn't the only long-range problem. There were first in the first signs of those problems back then that we no longer were by our own selves in control of either our economy or our destiny. We learned the hard lesson the hard way, that the oil market no longer belongs to us. The oil shocks of 1973 and 1979 should have alerted us to the fact that we couldn't stay insulated from the rest of the world economically. And while we were beginning to see the bottom of the oil barrel, whole new industries had begun growing up in other states and other places around the world. We had all the businesses and jobs we thought we'd ever need. The state wasn't actively recruiting new industries or new opportunities. Yet the economic competition was growing tougher, world competition. America was suddenly competing with Japan and Europe, and Texas wasn't even suiting up for the game. Where was the vision back then to assimilate these changes and keep Texas at the forefront of a dramatically different world? Who was paving the way back then for young Texans to rise to the top of their potential in new professions? Who worried back then about the poorly paid teacher? Who worried about the books and homework as long as our kids were winning on the field? Who was concerned about the language barriers for Hispanic children? Who was building the better schools and roads and water mains and prisons and all the things it takes to preserve the quality of life in Texas? Who was tending to the basics? No, Texas was growing in size without maturing in its outlook on the rest of the world or on the needs of generations to come. Where there's no vision, there's no future. And there's an eyewear company here in town that advertises, glasses ready in about an hour. Lose your vision in the morning, you get it back in the afternoon. But government doesn't work that way. It takes years to build a highway or to upgrade a water system or to perfect a set of school reforms. You can't afford to waste a minute or wait a year or put things off until better days. Building the future has to be a constant, steady, daily process going all the time. And once you've gotten behind the curve, if you lose a year or a decade, as we may have, it gets to be too late. We were there in 1983, and we're not out of the woods yet. I feel we've come a long way in 4 short years to bring Texas into the future. Let me talk a moment about what I think are the most important lessons. The first was to realize that quality education and economic development are one and the same, not separate undertakings. Without good schools and well-educated minds, we will never be competitive. The Japanese and the Germans, people in Massachusetts and California, they'll just keep eating our lunch. When I came into office, test scores ranked 46th in the nation. Teacher salaries were near the bottom, and the only thing being multiplied seemed to be the problems we were having in our schools. We turned it around. We made education the first priority. And I stand here today proud to say that Texas came to the front in 1984 with the very best set of educational reforms anywhere in the United States of America, and it could not have been done without these 2 gentlemen here. I want to thank Lieutenant Governor Hobby and Speaker Lewis for their leadership in making that possible, and I think we owe them a round of applause for what they did as well. Look at the test scores now. From 1985 to 1986, incredible results. The statewide average score on achievement tests soared 31 points. In districts predominated, this speech is going to go a little longer than I thought. We've had a new addition here. In districts predominated by minority students, it went up even higher, up 38 points. And among educationally disadvantaged students, unbelievable success. Scores shot up 49 points in a single year. Oh, they say, the tests are just getting easier. Nope. We're now raising the standards now. Every year the tests are tougher. The wonderful fact is that our students are just getting a better education. The Educational Opportunity Act of 1984 was adopted in lean times. Dollars were short, and we had to make hard choices so we could invest in the future of our children. When oil prices plummeted last year, The choices became harder still. Dollars were even scarcer. And we fought to keep intact the investment in education through the worst financial crisis of modern times. We weren't going to sell short the future of our children then, and I urge you not to now. Texas went further than many other states in reforming education. We had to. We were so far behind the rest. But no one else is standing still watching us go by. Other states and nations are racing neck and neck to secure better opportunities for their children so their children will be able to learn and compete and find promising careers and prosper in the years ahead. Our children and our teachers are no longer playing catch-up. Now we're moving ahead. But all the progress we've made in the past 4 years would come to naught if we blink now. We need to keep going forward. The advantages far outweigh the cost, and the returns on whatever we continue to invest in students and teachers and better schools will come back many times to ensure a stronger Texas. Teacher salaries. We need to spend more. That's right, more money on salaries for teachers in Texas. Teacher pay increases in House Bill 72 were a good start, but it's time to take the next step. The Select Committee on Public Education was clear in its recommendation that we keep pay incentives at a level to keep the best teachers in our classroom. Without good teachers, there can be no quality in any system of education. Teachers are at the center of any hopes and dreams that we have for our children. We mustn't let other states raid the teaching talent in our Texas schools. We've got the talent. We need to keep it, and it takes real money. Some people talk about running government like a business. I suspect you've all heard that. But there isn't a smart business person in the world who would treat valuable employees the way our teachers have historically been treated. A company couldn't keep talent in the shop if management didn't provide competitive incentives for its employees. And by the same token, Texas won't keep the talent in our classrooms until we start treating teachers right. Career ladder funding should be increased. I heard some people say, not too long ago, that they weren't too happy about performance evaluations. Maybe you heard that as well. You know, I think I've heard so much of that you may get the chance to hear some more over the next few months. But let's just solve the problem, not kill the program. The Select Committee stated clearly that career ladder levels shall be sufficient to retain quality teachers. Teachers are going to be the leaders of our children and our leaders in our society, and they should be rewarded fairly for the job they do. It's time we started taking larger steps in that direction. And to be truly fair to teachers, this state should offer a package of benefits for those in the profession along the same lines as the insurance coverage that we gave to retired teachers. Teachers have been kept waiting for the state to provide a health plan much too long. Let's look at class size. Perhaps the most important reform of all of those. We must go forward with that now if we hope to provide our children with the individual attention they need in the learning process. The learning curve goes up dramatically when a teacher has the time to give a student a little extra help on a lesson. Sure, it costs something. But if there's a district that has the money for a new stadium, surely they can find the money for a new classroom. That's what a school is. It's just simple things like classrooms and teachers. I believe the class size limit should be extended to grades 3 and 4 because it's working to improve the achievement of our young people in classes 1 and 2, and I think it should be continued, and I hope you will. Equalization funding, go forward with it. Go forward with it. It's the one thing we cannot afford are the costs of depriving people of an educational opportunity. It's astonishing to hear some say that a minority student can't learn. Let me just tell you, no one can learn without good schools and teachers. We cannot afford to cast away or to close the door on any portion of our population. If you don't have quality schools for all, you can turn out the lights and say goodbye to America. People expect you to do what needs to be done to help build a bright future for their children, and they're willing to pay for it. I truly believe it. In 1984, we set high standards in academics, and we have just begun to see the results. Test scores are rising, students are passing and playing, learning more, pushing themselves farther. They're going to be the ones pushing Texas further. To lower our sights now would not only let our children down, it would send a sad message to the rest of America that Texas gave up. Young people will become leaders not by looking at the ground, but by reaching for the stars. That's what higher standards are all about. Look at no pass, no play. I've heard about that as well. I hope you'll leave it alone. Every year the report comes back that there are more and more passing and doing better and playing better as well. I've heard the siren song of compassion for players who aren't eligible. How compassionate is it to let a child fail? How compassionate is it to let a flunking student pretend that real success in life is a touchdown on a Friday night? That's not compassion. Let's be real. Anyone who can learn after studying a playbook can learn after studying a textbook. And let's keep our priorities straight. Americans did not get to the moon on a quarterback sneak. And Texans aren't quitters. So let's keep it. It's working. Stand firm, I urge you, for the kindergarten and pre-kindergarten programs. These programs are now giving the youngest children the basic tools for lifelong achievement. Children with a strong start are the likeliest to succeed. If you teach a child to read in the first grade, you'll never have to do it again. Never. And it's so much cheaper then. Because we're doing that now, you won't find those young people falling into trouble later in life. You'll see less demand for remedial programs at less cost because we won't have to educate a person twice. And because they're going to be winners, they will be the least likely to join those who vent frustration on society by turning to crime and drugs and alcohol. Dropout reduction. Texas has been leading the way in this nation with model programs to retain and return high-risk students so that they complete their education. Communities in the schools, the Texas Conservation Corps, Youth Opportunities Unlimited. This legislature will receive the study mandated by House Bill 72 on dropout prevention. Current dropout rates are intolerable nationwide, but the Texas legislature has the opportunity to keep Texas at the forefront of innovative and practical solutions to a serious national problem. Let me make another point. We share a great deal of concern now, as we have in the past, over the overcrowded conditions in our prison system. How many have toured our Texas prison? If you haven't been there lately, you ought to go on a visit. I was over in Huntsville the other day, and my experience was no different than it's been many times before. I've seen the same things time and again in the lives of the inmates we incarcerate for committing crimes. I don't feel sorry for them. I feel sorry for their victims. I still feel sorry for us. I feel sorry for you who have to raise the money to pay for it. But almost every one of them shares the same life story, beginning, that's right, with a lack of education. Sixth grade is about the average level of school attained by prison inmates. None of them has ever held a job for very long. Most of them aren't qualified because they never mastered the basic skills necessary to make it through life. Just go out today and try getting a job if you can't write, spell, read, or understand simple math. You don't have an employable knowledge or skill. You can't get a job, so what do? You don't go away, you steal. No one ever taught you how to cope with frustration, so you turn to violence. They're poor and they're desperate souls, and that's where crime begins. We all pay a price for that. Society pays a costly sum for those who either waited or wilted when they had the chance to make something of themselves. And one of the tragedies is that no one probably ever asked them to try. The price is measured in terms of violence, lost potential, stolen property, as well as precious tax dollars. We spend as much to run our prison as we do to run the University of Texas. We could add a whole new university. If they had been better educated, do you think that those people would have grown up to become criminals? I don't think so. People I find that work at IBM don't rob the 7-Eleven. And everything I just said about improving our schools isn't just an economic concern. It offers a better, more productive, long-term safeguard against crime and prison costs and human suffering and a lot of tragedy that befalls some individuals in our society. That won't answer Judge Justice. Clearly, we need to spend more on new prisons. We've been building more prison cells ever since I came into office, and we're still trying to catch up for work that wasn't planned or done years ago. One alternative, which I support, is the privatization of some of those facilities, and I would urge your consideration of that as an economical option for the state. No, we can't pretend that quality education is an immediate response to those who violate our laws, but education ultimately answers the problem of how best to cope with and prevent wasted human potential. Think about it. Prisons or schools? Ultimately, that's the choice. One produces winners. The other is for losers. It's not very complicated. I'd rather see Texas spend its money building winners with better schools than having to spend it building bigger prisons for losers. And I trust and I hope that we have that vision and the fortitude in our state to continue making excellence in education the first priority. Who's going to employ all of our well-trained workers? Well, let me tell you, for all the gloom and doom, we shouldn't lose sight of good news. No other state could have weathered with as much resiliency the kind of year we had in 1986. And if you think it's tough on you, it's real tough on me. This state has a $300 billion economy, larger than all but 10 other national economies around the globe, and most importantly, our economy is a lot more diversified than many people realize. Look who's come to Texas: MCC, SeaWorld, Boeing, Cypress Semiconductor, Tyco, Grumman, the federal government's Bureau of Printing and Engraving. We better get in touch with them, Ms. Figger. They're going to be in Fort Worth. That's right. That's good. You're going to need it. The Navy Homeport, Lockheed, Mitsubishi, dozens of startups surrounding NASA, and literally hundreds of other diverse employers and producers. Many of you have played key roles in helping us get new companies to come to Texas. I don't have to tell you what they're looking for. They're here because, not just that we're nice, they're here because of the strong commitments we've made to ensure a strong business climate. Now think if we'd been luckier and the oil market hadn't crashed. Despite the tremendous loss of jobs and incomes in our major industry, oil, diversification has kept this state going. Unemployment in January of 1983 was 8.1%. Price of oil, around $30 a barrel. At the end of 1986, it was around 9.5%. The price of oil had gone as low as $11 a barrel. When I came into office, 1/3 of the state's revenue came from oil and gas. Today, it's only 1/10 of the state budget. If we had waited any longer to start broadening our economy, Texas would have become like a ship without a sail. Nevertheless, the severity of the state's current revenue problem, approximately $5.8 billion, was caused by the sudden and unprecedented drop in the price of oil. Prices plunged from $30 a barrel, as I said, to below $10. Now, I've heard it said that governors have a lot to do with the price of oil. Well, I've gotten oil prices back up. First of this week, $19 a barrel. I've worked on that full time since November the 4th. Let me say a few words about the very real and difficult task facing this legislature. For the first time in decades, state revenues are forecast to decline in the next biennium. And while this recession is taking its toll on tax collections, it's creating an even greater demand for state services. At the federal level, they have a simple solution. They just borrow what they need. It used to be that they would borrow during the recession and pay it back during the expansions. Now they just borrow all the time. They just borrow more during the recessions. Here in Texas, we don't borrow. We pay as we go, and that's what the Constitution requires, and that's what we do. We do it, and we brag about it. But the catch is, it's always been easy. In the past, we always had the revenue growth we needed. Sometimes we even had more than we needed, but in any case, we spent it all. In the 1970s and early 80s, no serious, credible attempt was made to think through what should be done with multi-billion-dollar surpluses. We thought we were smart because we had so much money, when it was just luck. The tax rates weren't sufficiently fine-tuned, nor was money set aside for the future. Now, in the midst of recession, we come up short. There must be some better way of structuring our tax system to avoid such drastic fluctuations in revenue. It makes absolutely no sense to set long-term policy for normal economic times based on conditions during a boom or a bust. What we should be able to project our revenue needs for periods of normal economic growth and come up with a baseline for state government spending. Currently, the sales tax is out of step with the new growth sectors of our economy and needs reforming to correct the imbalances that have developed. I endorse the expansion of the sales tax base. Retain those exemptions, however, for staples such as food and medicine. A 3% sales tax rate with an expanded base should generate sufficient revenues to cover essential services during normal periods of economic growth. That would become a baseline for future legislatures. Personal and corporate income taxes are unacceptable, and I include gross receipts taxes in that category. You here in this session can protect the citizens of our state and our business climate by passage of a constitutional amendment prohibiting corporate or personal income taxes except upon a favorable vote of the people. Let the people speak. I urge you to do that. But given our current economic conditions, we need more revenue than normal to close the budget gap. And I would propose a temporary 2.25% surcharge on the sales tax and extend the 5-cent gasoline tax for 2 years. Both of these measures would sunset in August 31, 1989. The sales tax would then revert to the 3% base. Gasoline tax would go back to 10 cents on the gallon. By that time, I believe the economy will have had time to revive its historical growth patterns. Taxes will be reduced automatically when they're no longer necessary to maintain the supply of services needed for our state. We establish a sufficient base level of sales tax collections at a rate calculated neither toward boom or bust, giving us enough to cover our needs during normal economic times. A 3% tax rate and an expanded base, wide fluctuations in revenue could almost certainly be avoided in the future. Ideally, this would provide the state always with enough revenue, but never too much. The budget I am sending you today is a balanced one. It's a budget that represents what I believe are the necessary and essential commitments we must make to ensure economic recovery, continue with diversification, and meet the needs of our people. It's a modest and minimal budget. Though it contains a number of new ideas and proposals, it is also a responsible budget which reflects only those priorities absolutely paramount to the continuation of this government and to the future of Texas. It's also a brightly colored book so that you won't trip over it when you put it next to the door. Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I won't go into the details, but I will say this. The monies for higher education, research, and business development are going to be a yardstick by which you can predict whether Texas and the growth of our new economy in Texas will succeed or fail. We cannot continue attracting industries in the future without the stronger intellectual base provided by strong colleges, universities, and research institutions. Now is about the last chance this state might have to put our universities, faculties, research facilities, and academic programs strongly into play. Look at California and Massachusetts, two states that are building their economic futures around great universities and new technology, racing ahead, and they're going after everything they can through laboratory investments and classroom investments. Our institutions are reporting having trouble keeping premier scholars and faculty members in Texas. Institutions in other states are already raiding our faculties. To let them do that is like letting them steal our seed corn. Either we move forward to recapture our national leadership in higher education as we boldly did in public education, or we fall back into the pack of average and mediocre states. There's no standing still. When I spoke for the first time as governor to the people of this state in January of 1983, I said we must try working together to pursue an agenda that would let Texas become a state of the future. We're not there yet, but we're many times closer than we were just 4 years ago. History has a way of relieving some generations from the terrible burdens and ordeals that others go through. Periods of great turmoil and tribulation almost always give way to longer periods of prosperity, security, and strength. Not because the next generation is better able to manage, but because in the heat of crisis, the previous generation had coped and planned so well. It seems like certain generations go through tough times just so the others won't have to. If that's the case, I'd like to think we've had the worst of times and made the best of it. I'd like to think that from the cauldron of the difficulties in the present, this generation is hammering out a mighty shield that will long protect our children and grandchildren in the future. Lord knows the founders did that for us. They gave us the Constitution we still live by, and it wasn't easy for them to arrive at that. It took an Alamo and a Goliad and the long trail of misery that led to the runaway scrape before they got to San Jacinto and before the dreams expressed at Washington on the Brazos could be secured. But they could never be secure without the succession of commitments kept by each generation to carry them on. Since then, every generation of Texans has done its share to preserve the majesty of Texas. Many years from now, when others come into this place and look back upon what we've done, if it is said of us, they built the future here, we will have done our part. I'd like to leave you now with just a few words from that inaugural. When I leave this office, I hope it will be said that we did make a difference. I hope it will be said that state government was more open, more responsive, and more just than ever before. I hope it will be said that we helped to guide Texas through a critical period of traumatic change and at the same time preserved our heritage for generations to come. That's what I said in 1983. I've had no regrets about it the past 4 years. So I go from here thankful for having the opportunity to serve. I go with confidence that the good things we have done will endure. I leave knowing in my heart that we have tried to make the future better for Texas and that it will be better for our children. I leave knowing that for the past 4 years we wasted no time, no effort, nothing of ourselves nor of this state's potential. And finally, let me try to express, although words can not suffice, all that I now feel. Linda Gale and I, we have been truly blessed by the opportunity to know this state and her people as we have known Texas. To know the kindness and strength and good-hearted spirit in the soul of Texas is to know the very best people on earth. To know all of our many friends and supporters, and to all of the people who have stood by us, to all who believed in what we've done, God bless you, and God bless Texas.